Welcome to the Page Turner podcast. Today we'll be taking a look into Genesis Code: The Reckoning, a sci-fi thriller from Dr. Steve Hodges that really makes you think about AI and gene editing. It's like Jurassic Park, but instead of digging up old dino DNA, we're creating it from scratch.
Yeah, Genesis Code is a total page-turner, but it also dives into some seriously real scientific concepts. We're talking about pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
It really makes you think, what would I create if I had that kind of power, and what would be the consequences?
Those are some of the big questions we'll be wrestling with in this story.
Okay. So the book features this AI system called ESM3, which sounds like something straight out of a Tony Stark lab. Can you break down what it is exactly and what makes it such a game changer?
So, imagine an AI that can speak the language of life. That's ESM3 in a nutshell. It's a large language model, kind of like what powers those AI chatbots you see everywhere these days. But instead of words, it's trained on billions of protein sequences and structures. Basically, it's learned the secret code of biology.
So it's like this AI has devoured a library of blueprints for life, but it's not just copying, it's actually creating something entirely new.
Exactly. And Genesis Code gives a really mind-blowing example. The researchers in the story ask ESM3 to design a fluorescent protein, something that would take nature millions of years of evolution to achieve. And get this, it actually works. They call it SMGFP. And it glows just as bright as anything found in nature. It's like squeezing millions of years of evolution into a few lines of code.
Okay, that's both incredible and a little unsettling. If we can create proteins like that, what else could we do? And I mean, are we even ready for that kind of power? What are the implications of messing with the building blocks of life like that?
Well, that's what makes this book so interesting. Genesis Code doesn't shy away from those ethical dilemmas.
Yeah, Genesis Code isn't afraid to ask the tough questions. So, speaking of game-changing tools, let's talk about CRISPR. For those who might not be familiar, give us the CRISPR crash course.
Sure. So CRISPR is like, well, think of it like a pair of molecular scissors that can precisely cut and paste DNA sequences. In Genesis Code, it's the tool that brings ESM3's designs to life, allowing scientists to manipulate the genetic code of their creations with pinpoint accuracy. It's like having the power to edit the source code of life itself.
Oh, okay. So we have an AI that can design new proteins and a tool that can edit genes like a Word document. And it sounds like we have a recipe for both incredible advancements and some serious ethical headaches.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. In the real world, CRISPR has already shown promise for treating diseases, but it also raises concerns about unintended consequences. And those concerns, well, Genesis Code takes them and amplifies them, exploring the potential for both good and evil that comes with wielding this kind of power.
I see. So Dr. Hodges is using this story to kind of hold a mirror up to society.
Yeah, and ask us to consider what we're willing to risk in the pursuit of scientific progress.
Exactly. And the characters in the book, they're forced to confront those same questions head on. They're driven by ambition, by the desire to push the boundaries of what's possible, but they quickly learn that playing God comes with a hefty price tag. Okay, this is already getting my gears turning. We've got this AI designer, this genetic editor, and this group of scientists pushing the limits of what's possible. So before we dive into all the ethical stuff, can you give us a little taste of what actually happens in Genesis Code? What kind of new life forms are we even talking about?
Okay, so without giving too much away, let's just say that the scientists in the story, they're not content with simply tweaking existing organisms. They're aiming for something far more ambitious, a completely new life form, one that's adaptable, intelligent, and capable of evolving at an accelerated rate.
So they're not just talking about curing diseases or enhancing existing life forms. They're literally creating something brand new. Something that could potentially rewrite the rules of the game.
That's right, that's the heart of the story. The question of what happens when human ambition collides with the awesome power of creation. And as you can imagine, things don't exactly go according to plan.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. It sounds like Dr. Hodges is serving up a sci-fi thriller with a big old side of philosophical food for thought.
But that's what makes Genesis Code such a compelling read. It's not just about the science. It's about the people who wield it and the choices they make. It's about the responsibility that comes with unlocking the secrets of life itself.
Wow. This is definitely one hell of a story I'm glad I took the plunge on. We've got ESM3, CRISPR, and a brand new life form that's about to shake things up. Welcome back to the story. Last time we were hanging out in Genesis Code, The Reckoning with Dr. Hodges. And man, things were getting pretty intense. We were talking about AI designing proteins, gene editing at a whole new level, and these scientists who are about to unleash a brand new life form on the world.
It's like watching a high-wire act, isn't it? You're amazed by the skill, but you're also terrified that it could all come crashing down at any moment.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Hodges captures that feeling perfectly in Genesis Code. That feeling of being on the precipice of something monumental, something that could change everything.
Exactly.
Right. So, last time we left off with these scientists on the verge of creating this new life form, something that's not just modified or enhanced, but completely unique.
Right, they're writing a whole new instruction manual for life.
Yeah, it's like they're not just playing with the building blocks of life, they're creating something totally from scratch.
And that's where the story takes a really interesting turn. It's not just about the how of creation, but the why, right? What are these scientists' motivations? Is it pure scientific curiosity, a thirst for knowledge? Or maybe it's something more like a little bit of hubris mixed in. I mean, come on. We humans have a bit of a track record when it comes to thinking we know better than nature. Well, Dr. Hodges definitely taps into that. The scientists in Genesis Code are driven by this mix of noble intentions and, let's face it, a little bit of ego. They believe they can create something better, something that can solve the world's problems. But the thing is, they never stop to think about what could go wrong.
Yeah, they don't really grasp the potential consequences of their actions. It's like they're so focused on reaching the summit, they haven't even thought about what they'll do once they get there.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about those consequences. What exactly happens when this new life form makes its debut?
Okay, I can't give too much away, but let's just say things don't go exactly according to plan.
Of course not. The new life form, which they call Promethean, it starts exhibiting these behaviors that were totally unexpected. It really pushes the boundaries of what the scientists thought they knew about life itself.
Okay, that's just cool. You're dangling the good stuff right in front of me. Can you at least give us a little hint about what makes Promethean so different? I mean, what sets it apart from, say, a genetically modified tomato or a cloned sheep?
Well, Promethean isn't just a modified organism, it's something entirely new. It adapts and learns incredibly fast, and it interacts with its environment in ways. Well, let's just say they surprise its creators.
Okay, so Promethean, what can it do?
Well, imagine, for instance, a life form that can not only heal itself, but also alter its physical form to adapt to different environments.
Shape-shifting? Now you're just messing with me. But seriously, that's a whole other level of complexity. So are we talking about a biological being, an AI, some kind of hybrid?
Well, that's one of the big questions the book explores. Where do we draw the line between biology and technology, between natural and artificial? And those questions, they raise a whole bunch of ethical considerations. Yeah, like, if this new life form shows intelligence, consciousness, maybe even emotions, how do we treat it? Do we have the right to control it, to experiment on it, or do we owe it something more?
Yeah. It's like we're stepping into uncharted territory here. We've figured out how to create life, but we're not so sure we're ready for the responsibility that comes with it.
Exactly. And that's the challenge Dr. Hodges throws down for us. Yeah, you're right. He's not giving us easy answers. He's asking us to confront these really uncomfortable questions.
That we as a society need to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's dive into some of those questions. What are some of the specific ethical dilemmas that the characters in Genesis Code have to deal with?
One of the biggest ones is the question of control. Can they actually control Promethean, or have they created something that's going to surpass them in intelligence and power?
Right, I mean, it's like the classic genie in a bottle scenario.
Yeah. And then there's the whole moral dilemma of what they owe their creation. Do they treat it like a science experiment? just a tool to be used? Or do they recognize that it has a right to exist and evolve on its own terms? It really is a classic case of be careful what you wish for.
They set out to create something amazing, but they might just have bitten off more than they can chew. So, what about the wider implications? What happens if word gets out about Promethean? How will the world react?
Well, that's another layer of the story. Dr. Hodges looks at the potential for fear and paranoia, the possibility that governments or corporations might try to weaponize Promethean to exploit it for their own gain. He even raises the question of whether humanity as a whole is even ready for this kind of radical shift in how we understand life itself.
It's like opening Pandora's box, isn't it? Once you've peeked inside, you can't just close the lid and pretend nothing happened.
That's a great analogy, and it really gets to the heart of what Dr. Hodges is doing in Genesis Code. He's not just telling a story, he's starting a conversation. He's challenging us to really think about the ethical boundaries of science and to consider what kind of future we want to create.
A future that's both exhilarating and terrifying.
Yeah.
Full of amazing possibilities.
But also potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And the choices we make today, the conversations we have, they'll determine which path we take. This is heavy stuff.
Yeah. And it leads us to a point in the story where the scientists have to make a choice. A decision that could have huge consequences for themselves and for humanity.
Welcome back to the story. We're in the final stretch of our story into Genesis Code, The Reckoning. And let me tell you, my brain is in overdrive trying to process all of this. We've gone from AI protein designers to gene-editing wizards to a shape-shifting life form called Promethean that's like rewriting the definition of life. I'm both excited and scared all at the same time.
It's like that feeling you get at the top of a roller coaster, right? You know that drop is coming, but you're not quite sure what to expect. Genesis Code really captures that feeling of being on the edge of something huge, something that could change everything.
Okay, so last time we left off with the scientists having created Promethean, this incredible, unpredictable life form, and now they're facing the consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
They're dealing with questions of control, responsibility, even the very meaning of being human. It's like they've stumbled into this whole new dimension of existence, and they're not sure if they're ready for it.
What happens when the things we create challenge our own sense of identity? And dives into some really deep philosophical territory. And this is where Dr. Hodges goes beyond the sci-fi plot. Exactly.
Right?
What does it even mean to be human in a world where the lines between natural and artificial are getting blurry?
And there are no easy answers. Yeah, those are some seriously big questions Genesis Code throws at us.
Big is an understatement.
It's like we're looking into a mirror, isn't it?
Right? This sense that it might show us something about ourselves that we're not ready to see. But at the same time, there's this underlying fear. It's adaptability. It's intelligence. We're fascinated by Promethean's abilities.
And the consequences might be way bigger than we can even imagine. But this time we're the ones playing with fire. Like in the myth of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods.
But they don't stop to think about everything that could go wrong. They want to cure diseases, solve global problems, push the limits of knowledge. The scientists in the story, they mean well. Our tendency to grab for power without really understanding the responsibility that comes with it. Genesis Code is ultimately a cautionary tale about how humans can be a little too ambitious. That's a great point, and it goes straight to the heart of the story.
Do they try to control Promethean, destroy it? How do they deal with what they've created? What happens next? And that brings us to the big question.
Or maybe even try to understand it.
Okay?
The scientists have to face their own fears and biases.
Well, that's the journey Dr. Hodges takes us on in the last part of the book.
It's about ethics, morality, the very essence of being alive. And it's not just about scientific progress anymore. They have to make tough choices, choices that could change the future of humanity forever.
Wow, you've really got me on the edge of my seat here.
Yeah.
Without spoiling the ending, can you at least give us a hint about what Dr. Hodges is trying to say?
Is it hopeful?
A warning, a call to action?
I think it's a mix of all of those things. Genesis Code is definitely a warning, a reminder that we're living in a time of incredible technological advancement, and we need to be very careful about the choices we make. But it's also a story about empathy, about understanding and accepting those who are different from us. In the end, it's a story that asks us to think about the kind of future we want to build. A future where science and technology are guided by wisdom, compassion, and a deep respect for life in all its forms.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. And it definitely makes you think about the incredible power we have as humans and the huge responsibility that comes with it. It's like we're standing at a crossroads, and the decisions we make today will shape the future for generations to come.
Exactly. And that's what makes Genesis Code so powerful. It's not just a sci-fi thriller. It's a reflection of our own hopes and fears, our dreams and anxieties. It's a story that sticks with you long after you finish reading it, making you question and think about the world we're creating.
So, if you're looking for a book that will challenge you, make you think, and leave you pondering the big questions about technology and our future, then Genesis Code, The Reckoning, is a must-read. It's a wild ride with a philosophical punch that will stay with you long after you've turned the last page.
And I think that's a perfect place to wrap up our story.
Yeah, we've explored the science, the thrills, and the ethical dilemmas of Genesis Code, but the biggest takeaway for me is that sense of wonder and responsibility.
I agree.
It reminds us that the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create through our choices, our actions, and our willingness to have these important conversations.
That's right.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep thinking about the world we're building together.
Thanks for joining us on the Page Turner podcast.
Join us next time and be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. We hope you've enjoyed the Genesis Code, The Reckoning pre-show. Don't miss the first episode. Coming soon on YouTube and X.